We are back with another episode of Must Sell Wide Receivers here. This time around for Week 7, we're plugging through this NFL season, and we've got some more trade bait here for you guys for this upcoming week's games. As always, most of these players are going to be relative sell highs here, players that I don't think can sustain their level of production. There's some warning flags, or some warning signs and red flags here as we enter into the middle part of this NFL season. So, as always, if you're new around here, feel free to join the SFS community. We are welcoming you guys. All of your fantasy questions, your trade scenarios down in the comment section below. Of course, as always, and we'd love to see you guys join some of our other platforms like the community Discord server in the description of today's episode. But of course, all of that gets started with a quick click of the subscribe button and turning the bell on so you're never late for a new piece of content. So go check all that stuff out, and let's dive into the video. I'll see you there. Alrighty, here we go. So for those of you guys that watched last week's episode, this shouldn't come as a huge shocker. We talked about him as a must-sell after last week's humongous performance against Pittsburgh, but then we also came out and talked about him as a must-start that week. And basically what I talked through was some people questioning that in the comment section below was the fact that I think this trade window stays open for a couple of weeks here, in particular this game against Kansas City, which sure enough, he comes out and yet again shows us the same exact concerns that we've had for him all along. Now, Gabe Davis is putting up viable lineup production in most scenarios here. And if you're comfortable riding with a low volume of opportunities each week and a great quarterback in Josh Allen, then maybe this sell candidate isn't for you. But the way that I look at this is there's just players that are in higher level situations in terms of their weekly usage offensively that I just have more trust and faith in here. And in these games where Buffalo, which is a very high-octane offense, continues to blow out teams on the other side of the ball, if Gabe Davis doesn't get his minimal opportunities early, the window for him to put up production is very, very small and can close rather quickly. So for Pittsburgh, it was him doing that in a hurry, in an absolute flash, scoring a 98 and 62-yard touchdown. This week, it was him scoring another touchdown and having another 14-plus point fantasy game in half PPR. So again, he's not having a supreme level of volume here. He's feasting on the big plays. His season high in receptions is 4 right now, which is very, very minuscule. His season high in targets is 6, which he's equated to in 3 out of 5 games here. So 60% of the time, he's seeing 6 targets. Everything else is under that number. So it's been a touchdown or bust type situation. Big plays are the name of the game here for Gabriel Davis. Again, I don't doubt his big ceiling. That is absolutely at play here, tied to an elite quarterback in Josh Allen. You're getting what you want to out of him, and that's not really something that we have to question or have too much concern about. But what I do trust, or what I don't have trust for is the weekly lineup dependability. Is he truly going to be there for my team week in, week out when it counts the most? Obviously, his down games have been kind of a result of an ankle injury here, but I really worry about these receivers that on such minimal opportunity and involvement in their offense need touchdowns and need that extreme efficiency and for Gabe Davis, elite ADOT in terms of the depth of targets he's getting downfield. So just keep an eye on this, something worth considering. Maybe you package him up on another player on your team to go get an elite option, whatever the case might be. Alan Lazard here for the Green Bay Packers, another receiver I'm selling high on after this week. I'm a Packer fan, and I straight up do not trust the things that Alan Lazard is doing here. Now, personally, on this level, he's been pissing me off the last couple of games because I feel like this guy thinks he's Devontae Adams with how, just absolutely arrogant he is on the field. He had the incident this past week where we get absolutely blown out by the Jets, and he goes over and, Sauce Gardner was taunting us a little bit, but he goes over and smacks the cheese head off of his head. He's whining after every play that he doesn't catch the ball, asking for flags, screaming at other people. Allen's a talented player. He's capable of making plays. He had a beautiful back shoulder reception for a touchdown this past week. However, this offense is not clicking. If you go and look at the methods of production Lazard has had in fantasy to start off this season, you'd be quite shocked to see he has had a touchdown in 4 of his 5 starts this season. He missed week 1 due to injury, but this man, regardless of his yardage, has been scoring. And the yardage, aside from this week and the game against the Patriots, I believe that was week 4, has not been all that exceptional. So you're looking at a player that I feel has extreme touchdown dependency here that, for the most part in this game, was also getting completely clamped by Sauce Gardner. He had under a 50% catch rate, going just 4 of 9. So he did have a season high of 9 targets here, but the game script was extremely, extremely negative for this team, giving up multiple blocked special teams plays, blocked punts, return for a touchdown, a blocked field goal attempt as well. It was a complete disaster here. And yes, Lazard did step up and produce again in this game, but I just don't see this being sustainable. If you're telling me he needs to score a touchdown in every single game to put up lineup-worthy numbers, I'm not biting here. So I just think that this is a receiver right now putting up numbers that are better than what we should anticipate from him. This is, in my opinion, a wide receiver by committee style offense. We did have an injury suffered to Randall Cobb this week, which you have to keep an eye on. Robert Tonyan took a big step up in terms of being a middle of the field target. But for Allen Lazard, if they're going to keep asking him to stretch the field, do you know how many times I should have recorded it or looked up an analytic for this, but how many deep shots Aaron Rodgers took down the field this week that just hit the ground? Like literally the only pass that ended up connecting downfield was with Lazard on that back shoulder fade. So I just don't trust this to continually succeed here. We saw, again, against Premium, grade A, top cornerback play. He wasn't making plays. It was against the second-tier guys, and they shuffled them up here. And if other teams kind of follow the Jets' blueprint and Lazard doesn't score that touchdown, they slap their best guy on Lazard and then just kind of, divert attention to other players. He's not going to continue producing like this. So, again, right now, if he doesn't miss week 1, he's probably a top 24 wide receiver or right on the fringe of that. I should go look at what his points per game scoring is on Player Profiler, but it's probably fairly good because he's been putting up numbers. I just straight up don't trust the consistency to continue here. All right, for those of you wondering, last quick note here on Allen Lazard. He is very close to being a top 24 wide receiver on a per game basis. He's the wide receiver 27, so a very high level wide receiver 3 here. He's been putting up flex-worthy numbers for sure, to say the least, because he's consistently produced. But again, an 80% conversion rate of scoring a touchdown is just, I would be shocked to see that continue here this season. JuJu Smith-Schuster, wide receiver of the Kansas City Chiefs. For those of you that, held on to JuJu, it's kind of hard to sell low or sell anything for him. I mean, yes, you were selling low essentially up until this game, but had his best game of the season by a mile, went 5 of 5, a 100% catch rate for 113 yards and a touchdown. He did it with run after catch and yards after contest here. But if I'm being completely honest, when you cut on the tape and I watched this in real time, the play did not look very athletic. He broke a tackle, he was in triple coverage, and all the Bills defenders kind of converge onto each other, and they smack each other, and they all tip over, and that leaves JuJu to kind of spin out of the pile and run basically uncontested to the end zone. So I'm still not super impressed with this by JuJu. I don't think he is at the peak of his powers athletically in the prime of his career. Every time he walks out there on the field, because I forget he wears number 9 now, he walks out there, and I'm like, who is that massive player at the bottom of the screen? He looks like a tight end. And then, he kind of runs like one, too, to be honest. I mean, I'm telling you, this guy's not super flashy quick out in space anymore. And I'm like, it's JuJu Smith-Schuster. And credit to him, he had a lot of yards after the catch this week. He made some big plays, didn't drop any passes, but I am most definitely looking to move off of him now. You can make the argument he's tied to Patrick Mahomes, coming off his best game of the year. Maybe they got some increased rapport and chemistry here. Oddly enough, I didn't know this stat either. Wouldn't have been very hard to find, but it was brought up on the broadcast multiple times. First touchdown for any of the veteran receivers brought in by Kansas City being JuJu or MVS this year. That was quite interesting. But again, I'm selling high in the big game here. We expected, and I talked about this last week in our must-watch wide receivers episode for this week, JuJu had to get it done in this game. Otherwise, his fantasy value is essentially useless here. Now you can start to make the conversation exist that he is fantasy relevant and sell that off to another player or another team. So, again, moving on from JuJu after this week. Brandon Aiyuk here dominated week 6. He had himself his best game of the season to this point in time. Had 11 targets, a team best there, 8 receptions, 83 yards, 24 fantasy points, and 2 receiving touchdowns. The red zone looks were both phenomenal. This is a wide receiver 1 for a lot of teams in the National Football League, but unfortunately for Brandon, and the reason we're going to sell him here is because he is not fantasy viable consistently with the 49ers staff game in, game out, week after week here. The reason for that is this team has a run-first offensive identity. They got down early. They had inefficiency running the football. Jeff Wilson actually had 0 fantasy points this week, which freaking blows. Fumbled the football away, only had 25 yards rushing. So that kills his stock there in terms of last week's games. Not necessarily a stock because, of course, we still expect him to come into this week's games and hopefully do something productive. But it killed his fantasy productivity from last week. So you get behind by 14 points to Atlanta. You take yourself out of the ability to run the ball just off of game script principles here, and you have to try and catch up. And this is a quarterback-friendly offense, but they do not succeed very well at catching up late in games. It was Brandon Aiyuk scoring both teams' touchdowns this week, being really the only thing they had going besides Deebo Samuel, of course, always there as a safe floor asset. But it was Aiyuk making big plays in the red zone, running phenomenal routes and crushing the competition. One of them was against A.J. Terrell, and he can just stop on a dime and make things happen. But the reason that I don't expect this to continue is this is a very good football team. They're incredibly injured right now. They are going to bounce back, and this is not a situation that I'm looking to invest myself into because of the fact we saw George Kittle be productive, who I still think is a more higher-end grade fantasy asset than Aiyuk at this point in time, on top of the fact that Deebo Samuel is still there. So all of these things are at play and functioning for this team right now, and that leaves us with a simple situation, in fact, that this Brandon Aiyuk should not see 11 targets consistently going forward. He might have a few 8-target games here and there, a couple of nice 6- and 7-target games where he's very efficient, finds the end zone and scores, but he produced like a wide receiver that is definitely within the realm of being a top 24 player this week. This week finishing, of course, as a top 12 option. Not sustainable, not something I'm expecting going forward. And a similar thing where you're just in an offense that doesn't set up the opportunity for, regular fantasy success for multiple pass catchers. And then Chase Claypool here. I really wanted to talk about this. I haven't talked about Chase Claypool all year. You're not going to be able to sell him for a ton here, but what you can use him as a helping piece if you want to make a bigger deal and go and get yourself an upper echelon player. Toss Chase Claypool after his big game on in there. Now, he may have continued success this week, and by no means am I going to bail on this take if he goes out there and does well again in Week 7. Pittsburgh has an issue with Kenny Pickett right now in concussion protocol. So what you've seen the trend be with Mitch versus Pickett is Kenny has the chemistry with George Pickens. Mitch has more chemistry with Chase Claypool. Chase Claypool is the wide receiver 2 in this offense when Mitch Trubisky's on the field, which, again, I expect to be the case this week. When Pickett's out there, I think it's, Deontay Johnson should just earn the respect despite the fact that his production has been awful lately. He should earn the respect of being the wide receiver 1 regardless. Claypool is the wide receiver 2, like I said, with Mitch, and it's Pickens, though, as the wide receiver 2 with Pickett. Very similar names there, of course. So moving into this Week 7 matchup, you've got yourself a situation where, sure, maybe he produces again. He had a 100% catch rate this week, 96 yards and a touchdown, another rushing attempt for 8 yards to slap on top of that. All fine and good. Nothing against Chase Claypool, Clownpool, whatever you want to say. I just like to make jokes about him since last year he had himself quite the field day making a fool of himself. But he's not rostered in, I believe it was about 62% of leagues he's currently rostered in. So some opportunities might be there for you to go and pick him up if you're in a smaller league size here. But looking to move off of him here again, as is the case with all these players, selling high on production that I don't view as sustainable or something that can be expected long-term going forward. This very well might be, I actually jotted this down in my notes here, this could be his best game of the season, and I truly believe that. I think that he might have had his best level of fantasy success and production in this week's game. So all stuff to keep your eye on here. Let me know, again, your trade scenarios in the comment section below. I'm happy to help you guys out and let you know what my thoughts are on those things. Of course, lineup questions are welcome as well. I'll be coming out with lineup advice on Wednesday morning. So stay tuned for all that stuff, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Go check out our Week 7 playlist on the channel, and I'll see you there. Peace out.